My mill threw my bags out. He needs a 20-year-old, not an old hag like you. My husband held his young mistress's hand and looked away. I signed the divorce papers and left into the cold night. They didn't know I was already carrying his last chance at an heir. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. Can you believe it? Right there in the dining room of my own home, the sanctuary I had tended to for 10 years, my mother-in-law stood arm in arm with my husband's young mistress. She slapped a check onto the mahogany table with a sharp smack that echoed in the silence. Then she handed me the cruelest ultimatum I had ever heard. She looked me dead in the eye, her lip curling in disgust, and said, "Take this $175,000 and get out of this house right now. My son needs a real woman. One who is young, fertile, and can give him an heir, not a dried-up branch like you." In that moment, I did not cry. I didn't scream. I just froze. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My gaze slowly slid over to the man I had called my husband for a decade. Dr. Garrett Vance, the esteemed OBGYN, stood there, his head bowed, silent as a marble statue. He wouldn't even look at me. His cowardice, his absolute silence, hurt 1,000 times more than his mother's hateful words. They stood there judging me, discarding me like trash, completely unaware that beneath my loose-fitting cashmere sweater, a tiny life was already forming. An unbelievable secret was growing inside me, and their cruelty today would be the catalyst for their downfall tomorrow. My name is Jocelyn Vance. Just hours before my life imploded, I was living in a bubble of pure, naive bliss. That evening, I had cooked a feast. The house smelled of rosemary roasted chicken and vanilla, his absolute favorites. I had lit scented candles in every corner, casting a warm, romantic glow over the living room. My heart was overflowing with excitement. I wanted to break the happy news to my husband, Garrett. The pregnancy test earlier that morning had shown 2 bold pink lines. At 48 years old, it was nothing short of a biological miracle. After years of failed IVF, years of silent prayers, and negative tests, I was finally pregnant naturally. I honestly thought this baby would be the thread of love that could mend the tiny tears appearing in our marriage. I thought this child would finally silence my mother-in-law's poisonous comments for good. But when the grandfather clock in the hall struck exactly 7, the front door didn't just open, it flew open. Garrett walked in, but the warm greeting died in my throat because he wasn't alone. Beside him stood his mother, Bernice Vance, wearing a scowl that could curdle milk. And trailing behind them was Tiffany Sterling, a 28-year-old woman in an expensive designer dress that clung to her curves, looking at everything in my house as if she already owned it. "Who is that?" I stammered, my voice trembling. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Garrett didn't dare look me in the eye. He shifted awkwardly, trying to pull his arm free from Tiffany's grip, but his mother had already stepped forward, blocking my view of him. Bernice positioned herself in front of her son and looked at me with triumphant contempt. "Let me introduce you to someone," she sneered. "This is Tiffany Sterling. She is the daughter of Carlton Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Pharmaceuticals. You know, the largest partner of the hospital where Garrett works. And more importantly, she is carrying my son's blood, the grandchild you could never give me because you are too old." Every one of her words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I was paralyzed. My husband had cheated. He was having a child with another woman. Suddenly, all the scattered pieces clicked together in my mind. The late nights, the new expensive cologne, the distant look in his eyes. "Why did you call me here?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Smart," Bernice scoffed. "We called you here to give you a choice. Here are the divorce papers Garrett has already signed. And here is the check for $175,000. Take the money, sign the papers, and disappear. Consider it a severance package for your 10 years of service. Service. She called my marriage service. I looked at Garrett, desperately searching for an explanation. Garrett? You're letting her do this? We have a life together. Garrett finally looked up, his eyes watery but weak. I'm sorry, Jocelyn. Mom is right. I need a legacy. Tiffany, she gives me a future. You and I, we're just history. History. 10 years, thrown away for a younger model. Tiffany moved closer, resting a manicured hand on her stomach, smirking at me. Be reasonable, Jocelyn. Don't make this complicated. Garrett needs a family, not a nursing home companion. My hand, resting on my thigh, involuntarily clenched into a fist. Then, I slowly lifted it and gently placed it on my stomach. There too, a small life was growing. My child. His child. But I knew I couldn't speak the truth. To speak now would be to humiliate myself. To use the baby as leverage to cling to a man who no longer wanted me would be pathetic. My child didn't deserve to be a bargaining chip. A terrible coldness suddenly wrapped around my soul, freezing the tears before they could fall. The pain morphed into contempt, and that contempt gave me a strange, vibrating strength. I slowly stood up. I picked up the check for $175,000 from the table. Bernice and Tiffany watched me with satisfied smiles, thinking they had won. But then, to their astonishment, I tore the check down the middle. Then again, and again, until it was nothing but confetti raining down on the roast chicken. Your money is no good to me, I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. I picked up the pen and signed the divorce papers with a flourish. I am leaving, but not because you are kicking me out. It is because I find life under the same roof with people like you utterly repulsive. I walked to the door, grabbing only my coat. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't look back. As I stepped out into the biting Chicago winter wind, Bernice yelled after me, "Don't you dare come back begging when you run out of money." I won't be begging, I thought. You have no idea who you just declared war on. Before I continue, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. It's hard to relive this, but having you here helps. Please, let me know in the comments what city you are listening from tonight. It makes me feel less alone in this big world. The Chicago wind whipped against my face, stinging my cheeks, but I barely felt it. My body was numb, but my mind was racing with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I hailed a taxi, the yellow light cutting through the swirling snow. When the driver pulled over, he looked at me with concern. I must have looked like a madwoman, standing there in the storm with no luggage, wearing a coat over a house sweater, having just walked out of my marriage. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked, turning the heat up. I took a deep breath. For 10 years, I had given the address of the modest suburban house I shared with Garrett. But tonight, that life was dead. "The Legacy Tower," I said. "On Monroe Street." The driver raised an eyebrow. The Legacy was the most exclusive residential tower in the city, a place where CEOs, professional athletes, and old money lived. It wasn't a place for a middle-aged woman looking like a cast-off housewife. But he drove on. As we navigated the snowy streets, I looked out the window, watching the city blur. Bernice thought she had won. She thought she had thrown a penniless, aging woman onto the street. Garrett thought he was the successful breadwinner who had been supporting me. They were all so blissfully, arrogantly wrong. You see, I have a secret. A secret I kept buried deep for a decade. To Garrett and his family, I was Jocelyn the housewife, the former library archivist who quit her job to support her husband's medical career. But in the financial world, under a different name, I am a ghost. I am a whale in the stock market. My father was a brilliant investor who taught me everything before he died, before he took his own life after being scammed by a woman who claimed to love him but only loved his money. Because of what happened to my father, I was terrified of being loved for my net worth. When I met Garrett, I hid everything. I wanted to be loved for me. I wanted a partner, not a leech. So, I lived modestly. I let him think his doctor's salary was our main income. I clipped coupons. I drove a 10-year-old sedan. Meanwhile, my portfolio was compounding into the hundreds of millions. When the taxi pulled up to the gleaming glass entrance of the Legacy, the doorman, who had been on my payroll for years to maintain my empty property, rushed out with an umbrella. "Mrs. Vance." "I mean, Ms. Vance," he corrected himself, seeing my face. "Welcome back. We didn't expect you." "I didn't expect to be here either, Robert," I said, handing the taxi driver a $100 bill and telling him to keep the change. I took the private elevator to the penthouse. When the doors opened, I stepped into a sanctuary I hadn't visited in 5 years. It was a 6,000-square-foot duplex with floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the entire glittering skyline of Chicago. The air inside was stale but familiar. I walked through the dark, expansive living room, flipping a switch. The crystal chandelier flooded the room with light, illuminating the Italian marble floors and the modern art on the walls. This was my apartment. Paid for in cash. My net worth was likely triple what Tiffany's father's pharmaceutical company was worth on its best day. I had played Cinderella, scrubbing floors and cooking roasts, while hiding a crown in the closet. And for what? To be discarded like an old shoe because I had a few wrinkles and hadn't produced a child on their timeline. I walked into the master bathroom, turning on the gold-plated faucets to fill the oversized tub. I caught my reflection in the massive mirror. I saw a woman of 48. Yes, there were lines around my eyes. Yes, I didn't have the taut skin of a 20-year-old. But I saw something else, too. I saw resilience. I saw power. I placed both hands on my stomach. The secret life inside me. A miracle. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the reflection, tears finally spilling over. "I'm sorry I let them treat us like that. I'm sorry I chose a father who is a coward." I thought about Garrett. He was probably popping champagne with Tiffany and Bernice right now, celebrating their victory. Celebrating the heir Tiffany was carrying. They had no idea they had just declared war on the wrong woman. They thought they had cut off a leech, but they had actually severed their own lifeline. I reached for the secure phone I kept in the safe in the closet. It was time to make a call. It was time to wake the sleeping dragon. I dialed the number of Mitchell Graves, my attorney and the only person who knew the full extent of my empire. "Mitchell," I said when he answered, my voice steady. "It's done. I'm at the penthouse. Activate Plan B. I want a full audit of every penny I ever funneled into Garrett's career." "And Mitchell?" "Find out everything you can about Sterling Pharmaceuticals. I'm going hunting." As I waited for the tub to fill in my empty penthouse, the steam rising around me, my mind drifted back 10 years. I needed to remember why. Why had I fallen for him? Why had I hidden who I was? I met Garrett when I was 38 and he was 40. It was a rainy Tuesday in a coffee shop near the university hospital. He wasn't the polished, arrogant Dr. Vance then. He was exhausted, wearing scrubs that had seen better days, counting change on the counter to see if he could afford a muffin with his black coffee. He looked defeated. I was sitting in the corner, reading a book, dressed in jeans and a sweater. I saw him put the muffin back. Something tugged at my heartstrings. I walked up and paid for his order, adding a sandwich. "You look like you save lives," I said. "You should probably eat." He looked at me with eyes so full of gratitude and humility that I felt my defenses melt. We sat and talked for 2 hours. He told me about his struggles. He was a brilliant doctor, passionate about obstetrics, but he was drowning in student loans and the political pressure of the hospital. He told me about his late father who died working himself to death, and his mother, Bernice, whom he supported completely. "I just want to help women bring life into the world safely," he had said, his voice cracking with emotion. But the system is so broken. I can't get the fellowship I need because I don't have the connections or the money to buy my way in. I fell in love with that passion. I fell in love with the man who wanted to save lives but couldn't afford a sandwich. I didn't tell him I was an investor. I told him I worked in a library. It was a half-truth. I volunteered there because I loved books. Our courtship was simple. Walks in the park, movie nights at his cramped apartment. He made me feel safe. He didn't care about fancy cars or designer clothes, or so I thought. He seemed to love me for my mind, for my quiet support. But I couldn't stand seeing him struggle. 6 months into our relationship, a miracle happened. Garrett received a letter from a private foundation, the Phoenix Trust, awarding him a fully funded fellowship in Europe for advanced robotic surgery training. It included a stipend that cleared his debts. He came running to me, waving the letter, tears streaming down his face. "Jocelyn, I can't believe it. Someone believes in me." He didn't know that the Phoenix Trust was a shell company I had set up the week before. He didn't know that the signature on the grant was my attorney's. I paid for his education. I paid off his loans. I paved the road for him to become a star. When he returned from Europe, he was a different man. Confident. Skilled. He got offers from top hospitals. We got married in a small ceremony. I insisted on a prenup that kept our premarital assets separate, ostensibly to protect him from my small debts, but really to protect my fortune just in case. He signed it without reading, laughing that he would always take care of me. "I'm going to give you the world, Jocelyn," he vowed at the altar. "You believed in me when I was nothing." I believed him. I thought we were building a partnership. But looking back now, I see the cracks I chose to ignore. The way he started enjoying the praise a little too much. The way he started deferring to his mother, Bernice, who suddenly appeared to manage his success. Bernice. The woman who poisoned the well. She moved into a house 10 minutes away, a house Garrett bought for her with his first big bonus. She never thanked me for supporting him through the lean years. In her eyes, I was just the placeholder who was lucky to snag a doctor. I sat in the penthouse bathtub, the hot water doing little to thaw the chill in my heart. I had created Dr. Garrett Vance. I had used my money to polish a stone until it shined like a diamond. And once he shined, he decided I was too dull to stand next to him. He had forgotten the woman who bought him the sandwich. He had forgotten that without the Phoenix Trust, he would still be a tired resident counting coins. But he was about to be reminded. The Phoenix was about to rise again, and this time, it would burn everything to the ground. If Garrett was the instrument of my betrayal, Bernice was the architect. The first few years of our marriage were relatively peaceful, mostly because Garrett was working 80-hour weeks establishing his practice. But as he became successful, Bernice became unbearable. The real nightmare began when we started trying for a baby. I was 42 then. Garrett was an OB/GYN, he knew the statistics. He knew it would be hard. But he was supportive at first. We tried naturally for a year. Nothing. Then we moved to IVF. Do you know the physical and emotional toll of IVF? The daily injections, the bruising, the hormones that make you feel like you're losing your mind, the invasive procedures. I went through 4 cycles. For times, I had hope. For times, I grieved when the implantation failed or when I miscarried early. Garrett's support began to wane. He stopped coming to the appointments, claiming he was too busy with patients. "It's ironic," he said once, coldly. "I spend all day delivering babies for other women, and I come home to this." But Bernice was the worst. She would come over for Sunday dinner, inspect the house with a white glove attitude, and then sit down to verbally dismantle me. "Garrett is the last of the Vance line," she would say, sipping the tea I had brewed. "A man of his stature needs a legacy. What good is a wife who is a barren field? You're drying up, Jocelyn." It's biology. You can't fight nature. I remember one Christmas specifically. I had just miscarried for the third time. I was devastated, raw, and bleeding emotionally. Bernice arrived with gifts. For Garrett, she brought a gold watch. For me? She handed me a book titled Finding Purpose in a Childless Life. I thought this would help you accept your reality, she said loud enough for the whole family to hear. Stop wasting my son's money on these expensive treatments. It's selfish. You're buying hope with his hard-earned cash. His money. She always talked about his money. She had no idea that I paid for the IVF cycles myself, from a separate account, so Garrett wouldn't stress about the cost. She had no idea that the very roof she was sitting under was paid for by the dividends of my investments, masked as Garrett's bonuses that I manipulated in the background. I looked at Garrett that Christmas, waiting for him to defend me. Waiting for him to tell his mother to get out. He just sipped his eggnog and said, "Mom, don't be harsh." That was it. Don't be harsh. Not stop it, not I love my wife. Just a weak plea for a lower volume of abuse. That was the moment I realized I was alone in my marriage. I was fighting for our family, and he was already checking out. Bernice intensified her campaign. She started inviting suitable women to family events. Daughters of his colleagues. Younger women. Just networking, she would claim. She would parade them in front of Garrett, pointing out their youth, their hips, their vitality. Look at Sarah, she would whisper loudly. Only 25. So much energy. She would make a wonderful mother. I swallowed the insults. I kept quiet because I loved Garrett, and I thought he was just under pressure. I thought if I could just give him a child, everything would go back to the way it was when we met in that coffee shop. I was a fool. I was trying to plant flowers in a garden that had been salted by his mother and neglected by him. But the final blow didn't come from IVF failure. It came from success, his success. As Garrett became a minor celebrity in the Chicago medical scene, his ego inflated. He started believing his mother's hype. He started believing he was a king who deserved a queen, not a weary soldier fighting alongside him. And that's when Tiffany Sterling walked into his office. She wasn't just young. She was the daughter of the man who could hand Garrett the keys to the kingdom. Bernice saw it immediately. She saw Tiffany not just as a womb, but as a bank vault. And she decided right then and there that I had to be removed. Sitting in my penthouse now, remembering the humiliation of those years, I felt a fire ignite in my chest. Bernice wanted a legacy? I would give her one. I would make sure the Vance name was remembered for its spectacular, public ruin. The affair didn't start with a bang, it started with a scent. It was a cloying, floral perfume, midnight rose, expensive and unmistakable. I first smelled it on Garrett's shirt when he came home late from a shareholder dinner at the hospital. I hugged the CEO's wife, he lied smoothly when I asked. She bathes in the stuff. I wanted to believe him. But then came the changes. Garrett, who had worn scrubs and sensible loafers for years, suddenly bought 3 Italian suits worth $5,000 each. He started getting facials. He joined a high-end gym he never went to. He was 50 years old, having a midlife crisis, and trying to keep up with someone half his age. That someone was Tiffany Sterling. I did my research. I knew who she was before Bernice even introduced us. She was 28, a socialite who had never worked a day in her life. Her father, Carlton Sterling, owned the pharmaceutical giant that supplied Garrett's hospital. Tiffany was known in the tabloids for her shopping sprees and her tantrums. I started finding receipts. Not for hotels, Garrett was too smart for that, but for gifts. A diamond tennis bracelet from Cartier. A vintage Chanel bag. These were charged to a credit card he thought I didn't have access to. But I'm a financial analyst, I track numbers for a living. I saw the outflows. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the emotional replacement. Garrett stopped talking to me. When he was home, he was glued to his phone, smiling at texts like a teenager. If I asked him how his day was, he'd sigh as if my voice was a physical burden. "You wouldn't understand, Jocelyn," he'd say dismissively. "It's complex medical politics." He forgot that I was the one who helped him navigate those politics for a decade. Then came the business trips. Weekend conferences in Miami, seminars in Aspen. I knew he wasn't alone. I tracked his flight logs, another perk of my connections. He was flying first class, seat 1A. Seat 1B was always booked under T. Sterling. I remember one night vividly. He came home reeking of that perfume and alcohol. I was sitting in the living room, waiting. "Garrett, we need to talk," I said calmly. He exploded. "God, Jocelyn. Can I just have one moment of peace? I work my hands to the bone to support this house, to support you, and I come home to an interrogation?" Gaslighting. He was painting himself as the victim. He made me feel like a nagging burden for asking why he smelled like another woman. "I'm just asking because I miss you," I whispered. "Well, maybe if you were more fun," he sneered. "Maybe if you didn't look so miserable all the time. Look at yourself, Jocelyn. You've let yourself go. You dress like a librarian. You have no ambition." Ambition? I controlled a portfolio that could buy his hospital wing, and he told me I had no ambition. But I bit my tongue. I was still holding on to the hope of the pregnancy. I thought, if I can just give him a child, he'll leave her. He's just dazzled by her youth. He'll come back to reality. Bernice, of course, was fueling the fire. I later learned she was the one facilitating their dates. She would invite Tiffany to lunch near the hospital and call Garrett to join them. She was actively pimping out her son to ensure her access to the sterling fortune. I felt like I was living in a house of mirrors. Everything was distorted. The man I loved was a stranger. The mother-in-law was a conspirator. And the mistress was the prize. But I still didn't leave. Why do women stay? Because of the sunk cost fallacy. I had invested 10 years, millions of dollars, secretly, and my entire heart into this man. I didn't want to walk away and let someone else reap the dividends of my investment. I wanted to fix it. It wasn't until that final night, when they brought the war to my living room, that I realized there was nothing left to fix. The rot had gone too deep. Garrett wasn't just having a crisis, he was fundamentally weak. He chose the shiny object over the solid foundation. He chose the easy path of corruption over the hard path of integrity. And Tiffany? She wasn't just a passive participant. She knew he was married. She enjoyed the game. I saw the way she looked at me that night, like I was a bug she wanted to squash. She didn't love Garrett, she loved taking things that belonged to others. She loved the power of stealing a husband. Well, she could have him. She could have the debt, the pressure, and the mother-in-law. I was taking the only thing that mattered, my dignity, and the secret air growing inside me. 2 weeks before the confrontation, I uncovered the depth of their depravity. I had installed a simple nanny cam in the living room years ago, originally to keep an eye on a house cleaner I suspected of stealing, but I kept it for security. I was at the library volunteering when I got a notification on my phone. Motion detected. I opened the app. It was midday, a Tuesday. Garrett should have been at work. On the screen, I saw Garrett, Bernice, and Tiffany sitting in my living room. They were drinking my wine. "She has to go, Garrett," Tiffany was whining. "I can't live in that condo anymore. I want this house. It has the perfect nursery room." "Patience, baby," Garrett soothed her, rubbing her back. I have to find a legal reason to get her out without giving her half the assets. The prenup protects my premarital assets, but the house, we bought that after the wedding. Just make her life hell until she leaves, Bernice suggested, taking a sip of Chardonnay. Tell her you're cutting off her allowance. Tell her she's useless. Break her spirit. Hearing them plot my destruction was chilling. But then came the bombshell. Besides, Bernice clapped her hands together giddily. We have the ultimate trump card. The baby. My grandson. Tiffany giggled and placed a hand on her flat stomach. I can't believe it happened so fast. Are you sure she won't suspect? Suspect what? Garrett asked, looking confused. That the timing overlaps with your marriage? Tiffany laughed. Who cares? We'll just say we're soulmates. Then Tiffany said something that struck me as odd. She reached for the wineglass and took a large gulp. God, I needed that. Being pregnant is exhausting work. She made air quotes around the word pregnant. Garrett didn't see it. He was looking at his phone. But I saw it. The air quotes. The wine. Pregnant women don't drink wine, and they certainly don't make air quotes about their condition. A cold suspicion settled in my gut. Was she faking it? Was this the trump card to force Garrett's hand? Garrett was an OBGYN, but even the best doctors can be blind when it comes to their own personal lives. Or maybe she was just early in the pregnancy and reckless? Regardless, the plan was clear. They were going to use this pregnancy to evict me. They wanted my home, my safe space, to raise their affair baby. That night, I came home and acted normal. But I started moving my valuable jewelry to a safe deposit box. I started moving digital copies of my financial records to a secure cloud server. I prepared for the end. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor. The very next week, I started feeling nauseous. My cycle was late. I assumed it was stress, or maybe menopause knocking on the door. I took a test just to rule it out. Positive. I stared at the stick in the bathroom trash can, shaking. I dug it out. Positive. I took 3 more. All positive. At 48. It was impossible. It was a statistical anomaly. I went to a clinic 2 towns over, using a fake name, just to be sure. The doctor confirmed it. You're about 8 weeks along, she said. The heartbeat is strong. I walked out of that clinic in a daze. I was pregnant. The thing I had wanted for 10 years had finally happened, right as my husband was plotting to kick me out for a younger woman who might be faking her own pregnancy. I had a choice. I could tell him. I could use this baby to fight for my marriage. I could say, look, I can give you an heir too. But watching that video of them plotting in my living room, I realized I didn't want to fight for Garrett. He was tainted. He was weak. If I told him, he might stay out of obligation, but he would still resent me. Or worse, Bernice would try to take the baby. She would say I was too old, incompetent, and sue for custody. No. This baby was mine. So when the night of the confrontation came, when Bernice slapped that check on the table and called me a dried-up branch, I almost laughed. I was carrying the only true heir Garrett would ever have, while he was leaving me for a woman drinking wine and making air quotes. I signed those papers not as a defeat, but as a strategic retreat. I was saving my son from a toxic wasteland. I was walking away to build a fortress where they couldn't hurt us. Back in the penthouse, the morning sun was hitting the glass walls, but I hadn't slept. I had spent the night reviewing documents with Mitchell Graves. Mitchell arrived at 7 a.m., looking sharp in his charcoal suit. He was the only man I trusted. He had been my father's protégé and had sworn to protect me. You look terrible, Jocelyn, he said, handing me a cup of strong coffee. But your financials look incredible. Cut the flattery, Mitchell, I said, my voice raspy. Did you do it? It's done, Mitchell nodded, opening his laptop. We've notified the hospital board. The anonymous donor known as the Phoenix has officially withdrawn all future funding. That includes the new robotic surgery wing Garrett was supposed to head. We also pulled the grant for his research. Effectively, his department is now $10 million in the hole. Good, I said, sipping the coffee. What about the Sterling account? Mitchell smiled, a shark-like grin. I've started shorting Sterling Pharmaceuticals. And I've instructed our shell companies to acquire the exclusive rights to the raw materials they import from India. Within 3 months, their supply chain will choke. Their stock will plummet. I want them to bleed, Mitchell, I said, looking at the city below. I want Garrett to realize that his genius was paid for by his wife. And I want Carlton Sterling to panic. There's one more thing, Mitchell said, his tone softening. You need to see a doctor. A real one. You're 48, Jocelyn. This is a high-risk geriatric pregnancy. You need the best care money can buy. I can't go to any of the hospitals in Garrett's network, I said. He'd find out. I know. I've set you up with Dr. Alcott at St. Mary's. It's a public hospital, very busy, but Alcott is the best for high-risk cases. It's across the city. Garrett would never set foot there, he's too snobbish for public health care. That afternoon, I went to see Dr. Alcott. She was a stern woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She ran the ultrasound. Hearing the whoosh-whoosh of the heartbeat made it real. The baby looks healthy, she said, wiping the gel off my stomach. But your blood pressure is high. And given your age, there's a risk of preeclampsia. You need zero stress. No drama. Can you manage that? I'm in the middle of a divorce and a corporate war, I said dryly. Well, find a way to find peace, she warned. Or you won't carry to term. Leaving the hospital, I felt a wave of vulnerability. I had all the money in the world, but I couldn't buy a guarantee for my baby's safety. I had to be careful. For the next few months, I went dark. I changed my phone number. I stayed in the penthouse. I hired a private chef to cook nutrient-dense meals. I did prenatal yoga. I watched from afar as my plan began to dismantle their lives. It started slowly. I saw the news articles first. Sterling Pharmaceuticals faces supply chain issues. Then, gossip from the hospital grapevine, fed to me by Mitchell, that Garrett's new wing was put on indefinite hold due to budget cuts. Garrett was panicking. I could tell because he tried to email my old address, asking if I knew anything about the Phoenix Trust since I used to volunteer at the library and read a lot. He was grasping at straws. I deleted the email without replying. But they put on a brave face. They had a wedding to plan. The wedding of the century, the tabloids called it. I wasn't invited, obviously. But I watched. Oh, I watched. The wedding took place 3 months after I left. It was at the Grand Hotel, a lavish affair that must have cost $500,000. I sat in my penthouse, wrapped in a blanket, eating pickles and ice cream, watching the live stream on the social page of a local magazine. Tiffany looked stunning, I had to admit. She wore a custom Vera 1 gown that hid her bump, which, oddly, hadn't grown much in 3 months. She was beaming, soaking up the attention of the cameras. Garrett, however, looked like he was attending a funeral. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked thinner, tired. The stress of the hospital funding cuts was clearly eating at him. I zoomed in on the screen. The reception was in full swing. I watched Tiffany. She was holding a glass of champagne. She took a sip. Then another. Then she laughed and threw her head back, finishing the glass. Interesting, I whispered to the empty room. Pregnant women don't chug Dom Perignon. Mitchell was sitting across from me, reviewing legal briefs. Maybe it's sparkling cider? Tiffany Sterling doesn't drink cider, I said. She's not pregnant, Mitchell. I knew it. She trapped him. If she's not pregnant, that marriage is built on a lie that will explode, Mitchell noted. Garrett is obsessed with the heir. Let it explode, I said. But not yet. I want him to suffer first. I watched as Bernice gave a toast. She looked like a peacock in her purple sequined dress. To my son, she screeched into the microphone. And to his beautiful bride, who is giving us the greatest gift of all, the next generation of Vengeful. Garrett winced. I saw it. He winced when she mentioned the baby. Was he suspecting something too? Or was he just terrified of the responsibility? The irony was delicious. There, in that ballroom, they were celebrating a non-existent baby. Here, in my quiet tower, the real Vengeful was kicking my ribs. I turned off the TV. I've seen enough. What's the next move? Mitchell asked. Now, I said, rubbing my belly. We tighten the noose. Hike the rent on Garrett's private practice building. And trigger the clause in the Sterling supply contract. Let's see how much love is left when the money runs out. I went to bed that night feeling a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction. I had loved Garrett once. Seeing him trap himself in a cage of his own making was tragic. But he had held the key. He could have chosen loyalty. He chose greed. As I drifted off to sleep, I whispered to my son, "You will never be like him. You will be strong. You will be kind. And you will know that a woman is not a branch to be discarded." The war was just beginning. And I was the general leading the charge. While I was quietly preparing for motherhood in my sanctuary, Garrett was discovering that his dream life was actually a high-security prison. As I mentioned, I had sources. Mitchell kept tabs on the financial movements, but gossip in Chicago travels faster than light, especially among the staff of high-end estates. After the wedding, Garrett moved into the Sterling mansion. It was supposed to be a step up from our cozy suburban home, a leap into the aristocracy. Instead, it was a descent into servitude. The reports I got painted a grim picture. Tiffany, the blushing bride, dropped the act the moment the ring was on her finger. She didn't want a husband, she wanted a servant with a medical degree. She treated Garrett like an accessory, something to wear to galas and then put back in the box when she was bored. The first crack in their facade was the living arrangement. Tiffany claimed that her pregnancy made her extremely sensitive to sound and movement. She banished Garrett to the guest wing. "I need my beauty sleep for the air, darling," she had cooed. "You breathe too loudly." So, the man who had complained that I didn't make his life exciting enough was now sleeping alone in a cold guest room, forbidden from touching his own wife. And then there was Bernice. My dear mother-in-law thought she had won the lottery. She sold her house, the one Garrett had bought her, and moved into the Sterling estate, expecting to be the matriarch. But Tiffany Sterling didn't share power. Tiffany took one look at Bernice's floral sofas and knickknacks and ordered them to the dump. She relegated Bernice to the carriage house, a glorified shed at the back of the property, usually reserved for the groundskeeper. "It's better for you there, Bernice," Tiffany had told her. "You won't be disturbed by the staff." I heard that Bernice spent her days crying, realizing she had traded a daughter-in-law who served her tea and respected her for a daughter-in-law who treated her like a stray dog. But the worst part for Garrett was the professional humiliation. Carlton Sterling, his new father-in-law, was a tyrant. He viewed Garrett not as a son, but as an investment that wasn't yielding returns fast enough. Every Sunday dinner was an interrogation. "Why aren't the profits up at the new clinic, Garrett?" Carlton would bark. "I poured millions into that facility. Why are the VIP patients canceling?" Garrett couldn't tell him the truth, that the Phoenix Trust, me, had pulled all funding, and that the hospital board was freezing him out. He couldn't tell him that without my invisible hand guiding his career, he was just an average doctor with zero business sense. It's just a market fluctuation, sir, Garrett would stammer. Fix it, Carlton would growl. Or you'll find yourself out on the street. I don't support failures. Garrett was trapped. He was living in a mansion he didn't own, married to a woman who wouldn't sleep with him, working for a father-in-law who despised him, and supporting a mother who was miserable. He had chased the shiny object, and now it was choking him. Sometimes, late at night, I would look at the city lights and wonder if he ever thought of me. Did he remember the nights we sat on the couch, eating popcorn and watching movies? Did he remember the peace? I didn't know it then, but he did. A nurse at his hospital, who was secretly loyal to me, told me that she found him in the break room one night, staring at an old photo of us on his phone. When he saw her, he quickly swiped it away, his eyes red. He was beginning to realize the magnitude of his mistake. But he was too proud, and too deep in the hole, to admit it. He thought he could still turn it around. He thought the baby, Tiffany's baby, would fix everything. He was clinging to that lie like a drowning man clinging to a rock, not realizing the rock was what would pull him down. By the 6th month of my pregnancy, my belly was undeniably round. I loved it. I loved the weight of it. It was the only honest thing in my life. Meanwhile, my war against Garrett entered its next phase, the real estate squeeze. When Garrett left me, he took his private practice with him. Or rather, he took the name. The physical building where his high-end Vance Obstetrics and Gynecology clinic was located? That was a different story. Years ago, through a shell corporation called Aurora Holdings, I had purchased the medical building Garrett rented space in. I never told him. I let him pay below market rent for years, essentially subsidizing his business. It was my way of helping him without bruising his fragile ego. But now? Aurora Holdings had a new policy. I instructed Mitchell to send the notice. Lease renewal denied. Or, renewal available at 400% of the current market rate due to rezoning and luxury upgrades. I wish I could have seen his face when he opened that letter. Garrett was already bleeding cash. The Phoenix Trust money was gone. His hospital salary was being docked because of the funding cuts. And Tiffany? She was spending money faster than he could print it. Her maternity wardrobe alone cost more than a Honda Civic. Garrett called the number on the letterhead, desperate. He didn't know he was calling a burner phone sitting on my coffee table. Mitchell answered, using a voice modifier. Aurora Holdings. How can I help you? This is Dr. Vance, Garrett sounded frantic, breathless. I received a rent increase notice. This is impossible. You're raising my rent to $40,000 a month? I can't afford that. I've been a loyal tenant for years. New management, Dr. Vance, Mitchell said coolly. The owners are looking for a more solvent clientele. If you can't pay, you have 30 days to vacate. 30 days? I have patience. I have equipment. My father-in-law is Carlton Sterling. Do you know who he is? We know Mr. Sterling, Mitchell said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. His credit rating has recently been downgraded. That doesn't help your case. Pay up or pack up. Garrett slammed the phone down. He had to go to Carlton Sterling and beg for the money. I heard about the screaming match from the Sterling household staff. You want more money? Carlton had roared, throwing a vase against the wall. You useless leech. You told me this clinic was a gold mine. It's just a temporary setback. Garrett pleaded. The landlord is gouging me. You're a doctor. Fix it. Carlton wrote the check, but not without humiliating Garrett. He made Garrett sign a promissory note, putting his own future earnings as collateral. Garrett signed away his soul to keep the lights on in a building I owned. I took that check, $40,000 of sterling money, and deposited it directly into a college fund for my unborn son. It felt like poetic justice. The man who kicked me out for being barren was now unknowingly funding his son's Ivy League education. But the stress was taking a toll on Garrett. He looked haggard. His hands, usually steady as a surgeon's, had developed a tremor. Patients noticed. Reviews started tanking online. Dr. Vance seemed distracted and irritable. He rushed through my appointment. I don't feel safe with him anymore. His reputation, carefully built over a decade with my silent help, was crumbling brick by brick. He was finding out the hard way that without the foundation, the tower cannot stand. And the biggest blow was yet to come. Because while I was squeezing his clinic, Mitchell was busy dismantling the sterling empire that Garrett was banking on. The 7th month brought winter in full force to Chicago, and a blizzard to the Sterling family. My plan to choke their supply chain had worked faster than even I anticipated. Sterling Pharmaceuticals relied heavily on a specific precursor chemical imported from India and processed in Europe. It was the key ingredient for their best-selling heart medication. When my shell companies bought the exclusive rights to that chemical and halted sales to Sterling, their production line ground to a halt. But that was just business. The crime was what destroyed them. Mitchell discovered that to cut costs and cover the supply gap, Carlton Sterling had started buying black market chemicals from unauthorized labs in China. These chemicals were impure, dangerous, and illegal. He was repackaging them and selling them as premium pharmaceuticals. Fraud. Endangerment. Racketeering. I sat on the evidence for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment came when Carlton announced a press conference to launch a new revolutionary drug, a desperate attempt to boost his crashing stock price. The morning of the press conference, I sent the packet to the FDA and the FBI. I watched it unfold on live TV. Carlton Sterling stood at the podium, looking arrogant and untouchable, with Tiffany and Garrett standing behind him like props. "This drug represents the future," Carlton declared. Then, from the back of the room, chaos. Agents in windbreakers marked FBI swarmed the stage. The cameras kept rolling. The flashes went wild. "Carlton Sterling, you are under arrest for fraud, distribution of counterfeit substances, and money laundering." The look on Garrett's face was priceless. It was a mixture of terror and confusion. He backed away from his father-in-law as if Carlton was radioactive. Tiffany started screaming, "Do you know who we are? Get your hands off him." They cuffed Carlton and dragged him away. The stock market reacted instantly. Sterling Pharmaceuticals crashed. It lost 80% of its value in an hour. Garrett went home that night to a mansion that was being raided. Agents were seizing assets. Cars, art, jewelry. They were freezing accounts. Garrett realized then that he hadn't married into royalty. He had married into a crime syndicate. And because he had signed those promissory notes to Carlton, his own finances were now entangled in the investigation. He was broke. His clinic was failing. His landlord, me, was demanding rent. His sugar daddy was in jail. And his wife? Tiffany was hysterical. Not because her father was in jail, but because her credit cards were declined. She screamed at Garrett to do something. "Do what, Tiffany?" Garrett yelled back, finally snapping. "I have nothing. Your father ruined us. We're going to lose everything. You're the man. Fix it," she shrieked. "I'm a doctor, not a magician." In that moment of total ruin, Garrett must have looked around the chaotic room, filled with police, weeping staff, and a screaming wife, and remembered the quiet evenings at our home. He must have remembered the stability I provided. He had traded peace for this circus. He was drowning, and there was no lifeboat. Or so he thought. He didn't know that the only person who could save him was the woman he had discarded, watching him from a penthouse tower, holding the remote control to his destruction. With the sterling assets frozen, life at the mansion became unbearable. The staff quit because they weren't getting paid. Suddenly, the Princess Tiffany had to fend for herself, and she was useless. Garrett was forced to take extra shifts at St. Mary's, the public hospital where he started his career, just to put food on the table. It was a humiliation for a man who considered himself an elite surgeon, but he had no choice. The stress made him observant. Or maybe, desperation cleared his vision. One evening, Garrett came home exhausted from a double shift. He found Tiffany lounging on the sofa, eating chocolates, watching reality TV. The house was a mess. "Tiffany," he said wearily. "Did you call the lawyer about the house seizure notice?" "No," she said, not looking up. "That's boring. Get me some water." Garrett sighed and went to the kitchen. When he came back, Tiffany was shifting on the couch to get comfortable. As she moved, her shirt rode up slightly. Garrett froze. He was an OB/GYN. He had looked at thousands of pregnant bellies. He knew the curve, the tension of the skin, the way the navel popped or flattened. What he saw didn't look right. The skin didn't look like skin. It looked smooth. Too smooth. And the shape was odd, slightly lopsided. "Tiffany," he said, stepping closer. "Is the baby okay? You haven't been to a checkup in weeks. Let me listen to the heartbeat. I have my stethoscope." Tiffany jumped up, pulling her shirt down aggressively. "No! Get away from me. I'm your husband and your doctor," Garrett insisted, his suspicion growing. "Why won't you let me examine you? You're 7 months along. I should be able to feel the baby kick." "My doctor said you're bad luck," she screamed, backing away. "You're stressed and toxic. Stay away from my baby." She ran upstairs and locked the bedroom door. Garrett stood at the bottom of the stairs, his heart pounding. The pieces started to fit. The drinking at the wedding. The refusal to let him touch her. The separate bedrooms. The lack of ultrasounds. She always claimed she went with her mother and forgot the pictures. He went to the guest room and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Could it be? Could she have faked it to trap him? If there was no baby, then he had destroyed his marriage to me, alienated his friends, and ruined his life, for nothing. He decided to play detective. The next day, while Tiffany was in the shower, she always locked the door, but he picked the lock with a paperclip, a trick he learned as a rebellious teen. He crept into her room. He rummaged through her drawers. Underneath a pile of silk scarves, he found it. Receipts. Not for baby clothes, but from a theatrical supply company in Los Angeles. Item: prosthetic pregnancy bump trimester 2 and 3 bundle. Realistic silicone. Adhesive. Garrett felt the world spin. He fell back onto the bed, clutching the receipt. She wasn't pregnant. There was no heir. There was no legacy. He had kicked out his faithful wife of 10 years, a woman who loved him for who he was, for a con artist who wore a rubber stomach. He wanted to scream. He wanted to kill her. But he realized he couldn't confront her yet. Not while they were under investigation. If he revealed this now, she might turn on him, blame him for her father's crimes, bury him further. He was trapped in the lie. He walked out of the room, putting the receipt in his pocket. He went to work at the public hospital, a broken man. He walked through the corridors like a ghost. He had lost everything. And the cruelest irony was that he found himself missing me more than ever. He missed my honesty. He missed my realness. He didn't know that miles away, his real child was preparing to enter the world. And fate, with its wicked sense of humor, was about to bring us together for one final, explosive collision. It was a Tuesday in late January. Chicago was being battered by the storm of the decade. Snow was falling in sheets, burying cars and shutting down the city. The wind howled against the glass walls of my penthouse like a banshee. I was 38 weeks pregnant. My due date was still 2 weeks away, but my son apparently had my punctuality and decided early was better than late. It started with a cramp that took my breath away. Then came the gush of water. I was alone. Mitchell had gone home before the storm hit. I called Dr. Alcott. No answer. The lines were down or jammed. I called 911. We have a backlog, the dispatcher said, her voice crackling. Ambulances are stuck in the snow. Can you get to the nearest hospital? The nearest hospital wasn't St. Mary's, where Dr. Alcott was. St. Mary's was across town, impossible to reach in this blizzard. The nearest facility was Mercy General, the overworked, underfunded public hospital 4 blocks away. I had no choice. I bundled myself in coats, grabbed my go-bag, and took the service elevator down. My doorman, Robert, looked terrified. Ms. Vance. You can't go out there. I have to, I gritted out through a contraction. Help me get a cab. There were no cabs. Robert, bless his heart, used his own SUV to drive me. We crawled through the whiteout conditions. Every bump was agony. My blood pressure was spiking, I could feel the pounding in my ears. The preeclampsia Dr. Alcott warned about was rearing its head. We made it to Mercy General. The ER was a war zone. People with frostbite, flu, car accident victims. It was chaos. I'm in labor. I yelled at the intake nurse. High risk. Preeclampsia. They rushed me onto a gurney. My vision was blurring. I felt dizzy, sick. We need an OB, the nurse shouted. Who's on call? Dr. Stevens is in surgery. Dr. Patel is stuck in the snow, another nurse yelled back. We only have the moonlighter. The guy from the private sector who picked up the storm shift. Get him. Now. I was wheeled into a delivery room. The pain was blinding. I was drifting in and out of consciousness. I just kept praying. Save the baby. Please, take me, but save the baby. I heard the door bang open. Footsteps running. The snap of latex gloves. Status? A male voice asked. A voice I knew better than my own. A voice that had whispered I love you and get out with equal intensity. Garrett. My heart stopped. Of all the hospitals, in all the cities, in all the world, he was here. He was the moonlighter. He was the only one who could save us. I tried to sit up, but the monitors were beeping frantically. No. I whispered. He was wearing a surgical mask and cap. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the chart. BP is 180/110. Fetal heart rate is dropping. We have a cord compression, Garrett barked, his voice commanding, stripping away the pathetic man I had seen in the news and replacing him with the surgeon I once admired. We need to deliver now. Prepare for emergency forceps or C-section if she doesn't progress. He moved to the foot of the bed. Ma'am, I'm Dr. Vance. I'm going to help you deliver this baby. I need you to focus. He looked up. He looked me in the eyes. The room went silent. The beeping monitors seemed to fade away. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face, leaving him ghostly pale above the blue mask. He froze, his hands hovering in the air. Jocelyn, he breathed. The name came out like a prayer and a curse. He blinked, as if trying to clear a hallucination. Jocelyn, what, you're... He looked at my swollen belly. You're pregnant? I saw the gears turning in his head. The math. The timing. The shock. And then, a flicker of something ugly, jealousy. Who is he? He stammered, his professional demeanor cracking. Did you remarry? Who did this? Garrett. I screamed, a contraction ripping through me. Shut up. Just save my son. Save him. My scream snapped him back. The nurse grabbed his arm. Doctor. The heart rate. Garrett shook his head violently. He closed his eyes for a split second, inhaling deeply. When he opened them, the ex-husband was gone. The doctor was back. Okay, he said, his voice shaking but firm. Okay. Jocelyn, listen to me. We're going to do this. I've got you. The next hour was a blur of agony and terror. My body was failing. The blood pressure was causing me to seize up. But Garrett was a machine. He worked with a focus I had never seen. He barked orders at the nurses, his hands moving swiftly, checking the monitors, guiding me. Push, Jocelyn. Come on, I know you're strong. You're the strongest woman I know, he yelled over the storm outside. Hearing him say that, you're the strongest woman I know, felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He knew. Deep down, he always knew. He just didn't value strength until he was weak. I can't. I sobbed. It hurts. Look at me. He pulled his mask down. His face was lined with stress, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked 10 years older than when I left him. Don't you dare give up. Not on this baby. Do it for him. He was fighting for a child he thought belonged to another man. He was saving the life of the woman he had discarded. The irony hung heavy in the room, thick as the smell of antiseptic. One more. Big push. With a scream that tore from the bottom of my soul, I gave everything I had. I felt the pressure release. I felt the void leave my body. And then, silence. For 3 terrifying seconds, there was no sound. Stimulate him. Garrett ordered, his voice cracking. He was rubbing the baby vigorously with a towel. Come on, little guy. Breathe. Then, a cough. A sputter. And a loud, indignant wail filled the room. Time of birth, for 12 a.m., a nurse announced. I collapsed back onto the pillows, gasping for air, tears streaming down my face. Is he okay? Let me see him. Garrett didn't answer immediately. He was standing by the warmer, cleaning the baby. The nurses stepped back. Garrett went still. He was staring at the baby. He lifted the tiny, squirming boy and looked at his face. I saw Garrett's shoulders stiffen. He leaned in closer. He turned the baby slightly, looking at the back of his neck. The birthmark. The Vance mark. A small, strawberry-shaped mark at the base of the hairline. Garrett had one. His father had one. Garrett turned slowly to face me. He was holding the baby like it was made of glass. His mask was down. His mouth was open in shock. This. His voice was barely a whisper. This mark. He looked from the baby to me, and back to the baby. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The math finally made sense. The dried-up womb. The barren branch. It was all a lie. I had been pregnant when he kicked me out. Jocelyn, he choked out. Is he mine? I looked at him, exhausted, triumphant, and sad. He's my son, Garrett. You gave up your rights to him the night you chose a fake heir over a real family. Garrett's knees buckled. He sank to the floor, still cradling the baby against his chest. He looked at the tiny face, the face that mirrored his own. "Oh my God," he sobbed. It was a raw, ugly sound. "Oh my God, what have I done?" The delivery room was quiet except for the baby's soft whimpers and Garrett's jagged breathing. The nurses, sensing the intense personal drama, busied themselves with cleaning up, giving us a wide berth. Garrett sat on the linoleum floor, weeping over his son. He touched the baby's fingers, marveling at them. "I didn't know," he whispered, looking up at me with pleading eyes. "Jocelyn, I swear, I didn't know." "If I had known..." "If you had known, what?" I asked, my voice weak but sharp. "You wouldn't have kicked me out? You would have kept me around as an incubator while you slept with Tiffany? Or maybe Bernice would have tried to take him from me?" "No," he shook his head violently. I would have been better." "You should have been better without a condition, Garrett," I said. "You shouldn't need a baby to treat your wife like a human being." He flinched. The truth was a weapon, and I was wielding it. He stood up slowly, his legs shaky, and brought the baby to me. He placed him gently in my arms. The moment my skin touched my son's, the world fell away. He was perfect. He had dark hair, just like Garrett. He had my chin. He was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Hi," I whispered to the baby. "I'm your mom. We made it." Garrett stood over us, his hands hovering, unsure if he was allowed to touch us. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. He had everything he claimed to want, a son, an heir, right in front of him. But he was on the outside looking in. "He's perfect," Garrett said, tears dripping off his chin. "He looks just like my dad." "He looks like you," I corrected. "Unfortunately." Garrett let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Yeah. Poor kid. I'm going to name him Leo," I said. "Because he's strong. Like a lion. He survived the storm." "Leo," Garrett tested the name. "It's a good name." He reached out and brushed a finger against Leo's cheek. Leo turned his head and grasped Garrett's finger. Garrett broke down again, covering his face with his free hand. "I ruined everything," he sobbed. "I threw away a diamond for a piece of glass. Tiffany, she's not even pregnant, Jocelyn. It's a fake. She's wearing a prosthetic." I looked at him, surprised only that he knew. "I know," I said. "I saw her drinking at your wedding." "You knew?" He looked shocked. "I see everything, Garrett. I saw you suffering in that mansion. I saw your clinic failing. I saw the arrest. You." He stepped back, looking at me with a dawning realization. The rent hike. The supply chain. The investor pulling out. "That was you?" "I told you," I said calmly. "I am not a dried-up branch. I am the root. And when you cut the root, the tree dies." He stared at me, not with anger, but with awe. And fear. "You're the Phoenix Trust?" I corrected. "Now, I'm just Leo's mom." He looked at me, seeing the powerful woman I had hidden for 10 years. He realized that he had been sleeping next to a titan and treating her like a servant. The shame on his face was palpable. The adrenaline was fading, and exhaustion was taking over. But Garrett wouldn't leave. He pulled a chair up to the bedside and just watched us. "I can fix this," he said suddenly, a desperate light in his eyes. "Jocelyn, I can divorce her. I have proof of the fake pregnancy. I can testify against Carlton. I'll get a studio apartment. I'll work 3 jobs. I'll do anything. Just let me be in his life. Let me come home." I looked at him. This broken, weeping man. Part of me, the part that had loved him for 10 years, wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that people can change. Wanted my son to have his father. But then I remembered the check on the table. The barren branch comment. The way he held Tiffany's hand. "Garrett," I said softly. "You can be his father. I won't stop you from knowing him. But you can never be my husband again." That door didn't just close, it was bricked over. "Please," he begged, grabbing my hand. "I love you. I realized it too late, but I love you. You love the memory of me," I said. "And you love the safety I provided. But you don't respect me. And I love myself too much to be with a man who needs to lose everything to appreciate what he had." He dropped his head onto the mattress, defeated. It was a scene of utter tragedy. A family reunited by blood, but separated by betrayal. Seeing him there, kneeling in his scrubs, sobbing over the ruin of his own making, I felt a strange sense of closure. I didn't need to scream at him. I didn't need to hurt him. Life had done that for me. If you are listening to this, and you are feeling the weight of this moment, the heartbreak of a man who realized too late what he lost, please take a second to hit that like button. And comment the number 1 below. Let me know you are with me, that you understand that sometimes, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Your support keeps me going. Comment 1 now, and let's see how this storm ends. Just as Garrett was composing himself, wiping his eyes, a commotion erupted in the hallway. We heard shouting. High heels clicking furiously on the linoleum. "Where is he? I know he's here. That useless husband of mine. Tiffany." And behind her, the unmistakable screech of Bernice. "Garrett! What are you doing delivering babies for charity when we are in a crisis?" Garrett stood up, his face hardening. "Oh no," he whispered. "Not here. Not now." "They followed you," I said, clutching Leo tighter. "They tracked your phone." The door flew open. Tiffany stood there, wrapped in a fur coat that was probably seized by the FBI but stolen back. She looked deranged. Her makeup was smeared, her hair wild. And there, under her tight dress, was the bump. Bernice was behind her, looking equally disheveled. They stopped dead when they saw me. They saw the baby in my arms. They saw Garrett standing protectively by the bed. "You!" Tiffany shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "The ex-wife! I knew it! You're sleeping with him! You homewrecker!" The audacity. The mistress calling the wife a homewrecker. "And you have a baby?" Bernice squinted, stepping closer. "Whose bastard is that?" Garrett stepped between them and me. "Don't you dare," he growled. A sound I had never heard from him. "Don't you dare speak to her like that. And that is not a bastard. That is my son." The declaration hung in the air like a gunshot. "Your son?" Bernice gasped, clutching her pearls. "But, she's barren. She's old. She's the only real woman I've ever known," Garrett spat. "And she gave me the only real child I'll ever have. Unlike her." He pointed at Tiffany. Tiffany's eyes went wide. She realized he knew. Panic flashed across her face, quickly replaced by rage. "You liar," she screamed. "I'm pregnant with your heir. And you're here with this hag." She lunged. I don't know what she intended to do, hit me, grab the baby, but she flew at the bed like a banshee. "No!" Garrett shouted. He caught her by the arms. They struggled. It was a pathetic, ugly scuffle. Tiffany was clawing at his face. Garrett was trying to restrain her without hurting her. "Let go of me. I'll kill her. I'll kill that brat." Tiffany shrieked. In the chaos, Bernice tried to intervene, grabbing Garrett's arm. "Stop it! Don't hurt the baby! My grandson!" She meant Tiffany's fake baby. And then, it happened. The moment of truth. Garrett shoved Tiffany back to create distance. Tiffany stumbled. She lost her balance on her high heels and fell hard onto her backside. Pop. It wasn't a bone breaking. It was a dull, hollow sound. As Tiffany scrambled to get up, her dress rode up. The bump, the silicone prosthetic, had shifted. It had slid sideways, halfway up her ribcage. It looked grotesque, like a tumor migrating across her torso. The room went silent. The nurses who had rushed in to help froze. Even Bernice stopped screaming. She stared at her daughter-in-law's midsection, where the baby was currently resting near her left armpit. "Tiffany?" Bernice whispered, her voice trembling. What is that?" Tiffany looked down. She tried to shove the bump back down, frantically adjusting her dress. It's swelling. It's a medical condition." "It's a pillow, Mom," Garrett said, his voice cold and dead. "It's a piece of rubber. There is no baby. There never was." Bernice looked from Tiffany's distorted stomach to the real, crying baby in my arms. The realization broke her. Her knees gave out, and she slumped against the wall, sliding down to the floor. "No," Bernice moaned. "No. I gave up everything. I sold my house. I treated Jocelyn like dirt. For a fake?" Tiffany stood up, abandoning the act. Her face twisted into a sneer. "So what? You idiots deserved it. You were so desperate for a rich daughter-in-law you didn't check the facts. And you," she glared at Garrett. "You were an easy mark. A greedy, weak little man." She turned to me. "And you think you won? You're still just a lonely old woman with a screaming brat." "I'm a mother," I said calmly. "And I'm a billionaire. And you, Tiffany, are about to be a felon." "What?" She laughed nervously. "Mitchell?" I called out. From the hallway, Mitchell stepped in. He had arrived with the cavalry. Behind him were 2 police officers and a federal agent. "Tiffany Sterling," the agent said, stepping forward. "We have a warrant for your arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, and aiding and abetting Carlton Sterling in money laundering activities. We know the accounts were in your name too." The color drained from Tiffany's face so fast she looked like a corpse. "No. Daddy said I was safe. He said my accounts were offshore." "Your father flipped on you an hour ago to get a reduced sentence," the agent said dryly. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Tiffany screamed as the cuffs clicked. It wasn't a scream of fear, it was a scream of entitlement. "This is a mistake. My dress. You're hurting me. Garrett, do something." Garrett stood with his arms crossed, watching her with pure disgust. "I am doing something," he said. "I'm watching the trash get taken out." As they dragged Tiffany out, kicking and cursing, the fake bump finally fell out from under her dress and rolled across the hospital floor. A pink, silicone mound lying amidst the chaos. It was the perfect symbol of their deception, hollow, artificial, and discarded. Then the officers turned to Bernice. She was still on the floor, weeping. "Bernice Vance?" the officer asked. "I didn't do anything," she wailed. "I'm just an old woman." "We have footage of you helping Ms. Sterling transfer stolen funds at the bank last week," Mitchell interjected, holding up a file. "Technically, that makes you an accomplice to money laundering." "I didn't know," she sobbed. "Tiffany told me it was for the nursery." "Tell it to the judge," the officer said, hauling her up. Bernice looked at Garrett. "Son. Help me. Don't let them take me. Garrett looked at his mother. The woman who had poisoned his marriage. The woman who had pushed him toward Tiffany. The woman who called his real son a bastard. You wanted the sterling life, Mom, Garrett said softly. Now you have it. You're going where they're going. He turned his back on her. Bernice let out a wail of despair as she was led away in handcuffs, shuffling past the silicone bump on the floor. Finally, the room was quiet. Just me, Leo, Garrett, and Mitchell. Mitchell nodded to me respectfully. The paperwork is filed, Jocelyn. The restraining orders are active. The divorce is finalized. You're free. Thank you, Mitchell, I said. Garrett looked at me. He looked stripped bare. He had no wife, no mother, no job, likely no home. He was standing in the ruins of his life. I have nothing left, he whispered. You have your hands, I said. You're a doctor. Go save lives. Do it for the right reasons this time. Not for money. Not for fame. Just to help. He nodded slowly. Can I come back tomorrow? To see Leo? I looked at my son, sleeping peacefully through the aftermath of the storm. Call my lawyer, I said. We'll set up a visitation schedule. He deserves a father. But Garrett? Don't be late. And don't bring any drama. My son comes first. I promise, he said. I promise. He walked out of the room, shoulders slumped, stepping over the fake bump without looking down. The next few days were a blur of recovery and legalities. I stayed in the hospital for a week to monitor my blood pressure. When I was discharged, the sun was shining. The snow was melting. The city looked clean again. Mitchell drove me and Leo back to the penthouse. The news is going crazy, Mitchell told me in the car. The fake bump scandal is trending everywhere. People are calling you the Iron Lady for taking them down. I don't care about the news, I said, looking at Leo in his car seat. I just want peace. When we got to the penthouse, it felt different. Before, it was a fortress of solitude. Now, filled with baby gear, soft blankets, and the smell of milk, it felt like a home. Garrett kept his word. He showed up for visitation exactly on time. He looked different. He had traded his Italian suits for simple clothes. He looked tired. He was working double shifts at the public hospital to pay off his debts and legal fees, but he looked humble. We sat in the living room. He held Leo for an hour, just talking to him softly. I'm sorry I won't be able to buy you a pony, he told the baby. Daddy made some bad choices. But I'll teach you how to throw a ball. And I'll teach you how to treat women with respect. That's the most important lesson. I watched them from the kitchen. It was bittersweet. We could have been a family. We could have had this happiness without the trauma. But maybe the trauma was necessary. Maybe Garrett needed to be broken to be fixed. And maybe I needed to be pushed to the edge to find my true strength. Before he left, Garrett stopped at the door. Jocelyn, he said. I know I can never fix this. But I want you to know, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. And I was the fool who didn't read the fine print. What fine print? I asked. That love isn't about what you can get, he said. It's about what you build. I tore our building down. Thank you for saving the foundation. He looked at Leo one last time, then walked out to the elevator. I locked the door behind him. I felt a weight lift off my chest. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate takes energy. I just felt free. 1 year later. I sat on the terrace of my penthouse, watching Leo take his wobbly first steps toward the glass railing. The summer breeze was warm. Life had settled into a beautiful rhythm. I had returned to the investment world openly. No more hiding. I was Jocelyn Vance, the CEO of the Phoenix Fund. I used my wealth to start a foundation for women, specifically for older women who had been discarded after divorce, helping them start businesses and reclaim their lives. Garrett was still working at the public hospital. He lived in a small apartment. He paid his child support on time, every month, even though I didn't need the money. He said it was for his dignity. He was a good father to Leo during his weekend visits. He never remarried. He devoted his life to medicine and his son. He was finding redemption in the quiet, hard work of service. Bernice was in minimum security prison. She sent letters sometimes, blaming Tiffany, blaming the government, blaming me. I never opened them. They went straight into the shredder. Tiffany was serving 5 years for fraud. Last I heard, she was working in the prison laundry. I picked up Leo and spun him around, his giggles filling the air. "Look at the world, baby," I said, pointing to the skyline. "It's big. And it's yours." I thought back to that night at the dinner table. The $175,000 check. The dried-up womb comment. They tried to bury me. They didn't know I was a seed. For all the women listening to my story, especially those of you who feel invisible, who feel like you've given everything to everyone else and have nothing left, listen to me. You are not a branch to be broken. You are the tree. You are the shelter. Don't let anyone tell you your value is tied to your youth, or your husband, or your ability to please others. Your value is in your resilience. Your value is in your mind. Your value is in your heart. If someone kicks you out, don't just leave. Build a castle they can't afford to enter. My name is Jocelyn Vance. I was a discarded wife. Now, I am a mother, a billionaire, and the author of my own destiny. And let me tell you, the view from the top is spectacular. Thank you for listening to my journey. As we close the final chapter of Jocelyn's journey, we are left with a powerful reminder about the true nature of worth. Her transformation reveals that dignity is not a gift bestowed by others, but a fortress we must build ourselves. This story goes beyond a mere tale of revenge. It is a profound lesson on self-preservation and the courage to walk away from toxicity, no matter the cost. It teaches us that while betrayal can strip away a lifestyle, it can never confiscate a person's resilience or inner strength. True power lies not in vengeance, but in the freedom to thrive independently after the storm has passed. Let this story be a beacon for anyone navigating their own darkest night, proving that the sun always rises for those who refuse to give up. What did you take away from this journey? Please share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if these lessons resonated with your heart today.